Our top story tonight on Deep Dive. Russian President Vladimir Putin has finally arrived in Delhi. Much awaited visit. The bonhomie with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is clearly visible and it's palpable. Their friendship. Make no mistake here, this is India's most high stakes diplomatic test in years. Right before Putin landed, India and Russia, we hear, had already extensive talks about multiple deals, including a nuclear deal. In fact, initial reports suggested that a $2 billion deal to lease a nuclear-powered submarine was sealed, but information coming in that that's still under discussion. Now, certainly this meeting sets the tone for two-day visit where extensive talks on defense, energy and strategy are all going to be on the table. This is Putin's first visit since the Ukraine war began, since Western sanctions tightened, since the ICC issued a warrant against him, and since the US ramped up tariff pressures on India. Every handshake today is being watched in the US, in Brussels, Beijing, Washington, all very closely watching the two leaders meeting. And clearly we know why at this point. Both nations have been quite close despite US sanctions and Europe's opposition. Friendship between India and Russia has only grown in proportion. Well, look at the timing as well. At this point, all eyes are on this meet here is because US has slapped 50% tariffs on Indian goods. EU, India, FTA is currently at a final stretch. German Chancellor is currently visiting, the plan has been approved where he's going to be visiting India in January. EU leaders are Republic Day chief guests next month. So EU extensively engages in India, but not with Russia. US also engaging with India, but still slapping sanctions on India for buying oil from Russia. So it seems like a sore point here, this meeting between the two nations, the Europe and the United States, the West entirely staring and evaluating. Right before Putin arrived, envoys of French, Germany and the UK wrote a sharp op-ed as well in an Indian newspaper attacking Putin and questioning the war. In fact, Russia also hit back. A diplomatic face-off happened, fought in India's media space as well. Russia has gone on to say, if anything, I will launch a war against Europe. That's how far Russia has gone, taking Europe and the US head on. India, though, has been diplomatic, has been very clear on one hand also, saying that India watches out for its own interests. India has also clearly mentioned that we are not signatories to the Rome Statute. So we are not obliged to act on the ICC warrant against Russia. So therefore, our dealings with Russia will be as per our interests. This visit is not about optics here. It's all about economy and our strategic autonomy. 25 years of special partnership and a new twist, Putin's visit here, marking 25 years of India-Russia strategic partnership. In the last 11 years, Modi has met Putin 19 times, and that's huge, and that's also rare. And today, the relationship is being reinvented under all this fire. Russia is facing historic labor shortage and sanctions, a shrinking young population, manpower diverted to war, and Moscow wants Indian workers and skilled talent. A new chapter, of course. Defense also, something that both countries are very closely looking at. Russia once supplied nearly 90% of India's weapons. Today, that share has dropped to 36%, the lowest in 60 years. So Russia wants to establish that equation, wants to improve defense ties with India. India has also diversified, also gone to France and US as big players for defense and supplies. So Russia now still wanting to rekindle that equation. So here's what we're looking at. We're looking at defense, we're looking at labor tie-up, and of course, a lot more on India and Russia at this point, deciding to bank more on their local currency than the US's dollar. So the rupee and ruble, something that India and Russia have extensively tried to sharpen, and this coming together would also mean a way of undermining the US dollar's dominance and improving our own currency. So this is more than one. It's at this point, India and Russia are also looking at partnerships on nuclear submarine access, hypersonic tech, S-400 missile systems, legacy platform support. Well, all of this that's going to be talked about extensively. India depends on talks on the S-500 air defense system, and Su-57 fighter jet co-production are also expected. So, well, that's that. Oil, that's also largely bought from Russia. Russia has become India's #1 crude supplier as well. So bilateral trade has hit nearly 68.7 billion with Russia, mostly to do with oil and energy. Well, sanctions of billions are there in place, yes, but at the same time, both the countries are looking at its personal interests. Let me bring in our panelists on board to give us a little more clarity on Russia and India's tie-up. It's going to be interesting to see what the two country chiefs are going to be discussing on this very day. The next 2 days are going to be extensively important. Let me bring in Ambassador Veena Sikri, former Indian diplomat, Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, and Major General S.P. Asthana, defense and security expert. I really appreciate all of you joining us here tonight. Let me start with Ambassador Veena Sikri. Ma'am, India's strategic autonomy could not have been more bold and established for the world to watch, with all those heavy sanctions on Russia and the Europe at this point trying as much as possible to criticize this friendship. Here you have Russia and India's friendship gaining strength and momentum like it's never been before. The Prime Minister Modi arriving at the airport to personally receive Putin, visuals on our screens, if we could play that out extensively, on the bonhomie that the two leaders are sharing. They're going to have a great dinner tonight. They will have talks tomorrow, day after. So the strategic partnership between Russia and India is right now seeing a high pitch. Give us a little more on what message India is sending out to the world today.
Well, I think the first and most important message is one of strategic autonomy, that we will develop our relations with every country of the world in keeping with our own interests, our national interests and security and other interests, and of course, depending on the response we get from that country. And I think that this message is particularly strong with the visit of President Putin because President Trump had imposed tariffs, a special 25% extra tariff on India because of our purchases of Russian oil. But India considered this to be very unfair and discriminatory because similar tariffs have not been imposed on countries like China, which buy many more times the energy products from Russia than India does, and neither has it been imposed on Europe, which also has been buying energy products from Russia. So we have not, given in on that, and we've continued to buy. But of course, although purchases of energy products from Russia have gone down after the sanctions on the large Russian oil companies, but still there will be aspects of energy to be discussed, which will include, Sakhalin oil supply, oil development, and India's investment there, the Vladivostok-Chennai link, and that could be another way for transporting energy as well, and the possibility of India buying these small modular nuclear reactors from Russia, because these are important when in the context of developing artificial intelligence centers, which need huge amounts of dedicated power supplies. And there's a lot of talk now of using these small modular nuclear reactors for that purpose. So certainly energy is going to be a very important part. But we should also know that we cannot see this visit only in the context of the current volatile geopolitical situation that prevails worldwide, because we have been continuing this special privileged strategic partnership with Russia for decades. And this is, the 23rd bilateral summit in the last 26 years. So that's not a small amount. It shows the great importance that both countries place for each other. And this is also President Putin's first visit to India for a bilateral summit after the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. So that's, a special significance. So certainly that will be discussed.
But give us a little more on the kind of challenge that we are signaling to the Western-led global order. Is this a challenge to the Western-led global order? What exactly are we exuding through this meeting, this bonhomie, at a time when there are ICC warrants on Russia and claims of war crimes on Russia, on Putin? Ukraine war is still on. At a time like this, where Europe and the West are looking at Russia as the enemy, as the evil, and someone indulging in war crimes, ICC warrants on him. Here is India indulging extensively and more. This is much more than friendship, much more than, diplomacy. It's certainly friendship. That's what's visible. So what kind of signal in the sense, and what challenge are we giving to the Western-led global order?
I think the correct term is the Western-led global order. What is happening to the Western-led global order is a question that we should be asking now. But certainly you are right that the Western countries would consider it in the light in which you have spelled out in your question, that they would consider it that, oh, this is. But I must say, as you said yourself, the European leaders have been invited to the Republic Day parade. So we are not discriminating. We are not saying we are only developing relations with Russia and not with any other Western country. We have maintained, again, this concept of strategic autonomy, that we are inviting other countries, we are talking to them, we are hoping that President Trump will come to India for the Quad Summit this year, very much being talked about, but nothing being finalized yet. And why should any country where we are developing relations with them as well worry about what we are doing with Russia? Because this is part, as I said, nothing that we are bringing in new now at this time with a particular view to anger any other country, but we are doing it because this is part of our tradition of good relationship with Russia. For us, foreign policy is not a zero-sum game. We don't develop relations with Russia at the expense of any other country or at the cost of minimizing relations with any other country. Every country's relationship is developed in its own rights based on principles and bilateral interests. And in the Ukraine-Russia conflict as well, Prime Minister Modi is one of the few leaders who is touched with both sides. President Zelensky has called our Prime Minister. President Putin has spoken about the Ukraine-Russia conflict with our Prime Minister many, many times, and surely this time too they will be talking about it. So this is a very, very significant visit in its own right, and in the context of the current geopolitical fragility that exists worldwide, this does acquire special significance.
All right. If I could also bring in Major General Asthana on that. Major General Asthana, here we're looking at India also. At the same time, while it engages with Russia extensively with regards to oil, defense supplies that Russia used to be a major source of has now shifted to France, to the United States, and of course India's indigenous weaponry that we're banking on. Make in India is what we strive on, and then our main sources have now shifted to America and France. So what does that also spell out? What does that really mean? While we're great friends with Russia, we're also not banking heavily entirely on the country. Also shifting our equations when it comes to sourcing of defense to America and France, keeping the West also happy.
No, it's not the question of keeping anybody happy. We are very clear in our mind that we need to be self-reliant, and for that self-reliance, it can't happen overnight. And therefore, there is a dependence. There are certain critical technologies which we need to buy, and that we are buying. And at the same time, not to be dependent on one country, we are diversifying. Nothing has gone wrong with the relationship between Russia and India, but certainly Russia is involved in a major conflict, and therefore if we source everything from one country, we may have problems subsequently. Number one. Number two, Russia is a trusted partner. If between two countries or our relationship with any other country has gone ups and downs, has seen ups and downs, but it is only Russia which has been an absolutely stable relationship. Thirdly, Russia gave us technology and defense technology at a time when nobody was sharing with us. So we have a lot of dependence on Russia in terms of spare parts, in terms of a fair amount of equipment. And the equipment which Russia has given to us, it has also stood the test of time. It is strong equipment. It can withstand various kinds of terrains. India has a variety of terrains, and therefore they have a very sturdy equipment, which which suits us well. So therefore, the amount of equipment has certainly gone down because we diversified, and diversification was important. And also we also started producing a lot from our side. But notwithstanding that, items like S400, collaborations like BrahMos, these are success stories, and we would like to have more, whether it is S400 or the next generation S500. The remaining S400 are yet to come. Similarly, you mentioned in your commentary about the nuclear submarine. Also, there are other issues which we are doing, like RELOS, reciprocal exchange of logistic support agreement. Now we are signing with Russia now, but we have already signed with half a dozen countries earlier, including America, including France. So it's not that a major exception is being done. At the same time, it is a trusted partnership. They helped us in 71 war when nobody else and USA was on the other side. So we would like to continue this kind of a relationship. And also, if you recall, we have a major concern now with Russia in a manner that the trade is we are importing $63 billion and exporting only $5 billion. Now this is a very wide gap. Now I think Russians are conscious of this problem, and therefore even in his initial interview, Peskov mentioned that we are bringing the teams to address this particular issue in particular, and both the businessmen of both the countries to sit down together and find and work out as to what maximum way can we import from India and set this balance right, because this balance also disturbs the rupee ruble trade. Uh, uh, if Russia has far too much of rupees, then obviously we will have to choose some other currency. So that is so there is a lot on the table. Education is another, manpower movement and mobility, manpower mobility is another issues, and therefore I think this is a partnership which is important. In fact, a little earlier I was speaking in one of the European channels, and I had to say in no uncertain terms, see, we have to look after our interest and view Russia from our prism of our national interest, and not European prism or USA's prism. So that is the way we look at Russia, and I think we have every reason to do all kinds of deals with Russia. Back to you.
Yeah. No, Professor, if I could also bring you in, Professor Swaran Singh, on the Indian rupee and ruble, the two currencies. Do you believe that Russia and India relationship also is in a bid to strengthen the two currencies, while you have the US dollar dominance now widening, and Indian rupee has fallen extensively against the dollar. This meeting and the trade with Russia that India does is also going to strengthen the rupee in that sense. That's also one of the main focus. Could you elaborate how that would happen when the world banks and relies heavily on the US dollar? Nations like India, Russia coming together and extensively doing trade within the two countries, between each other. How does that strengthen the rupee?
See, it's a bilateral matter for India and Russia, and they have already repeatedly said that now occasionally up to 90% of their bilateral trade is done in local currencies. Now, local currencies sometimes mean ruble, rupee, and UAE dinar also being used sometime in that exchange. At BRICS level, some of the countries, China particularly, to some extent Russia, have even spoken about de-dollarization. India does not talk about de-dollarization. India talks of simply increasing the kind of use of local currencies, which is the focus. And I think I agree with General Astana. The only issue is when the trade grows exponentially from $8 billion in 2020 to $68 billion in 2024. And particularly when the trade is virtually one-sided, India is exporting about $4.9 billion and importing about $64 billion. The trouble becomes, what will Moscow do with so many rupees on their side in that sense? One possibility is that they could invest it back in India. That's a possibility. They are exploring that in terms of going in for refineries, building refineries in India. But those are challenges, not the intention, but how to operationalize that, and whether that is going to strengthen Indian rupee, that remains a bit of uncertain situation, because strength of rupee doesn't depend only in terms of how do we deal in a bilateral trade. It depends on the larger basket of currencies where Indian rupee either becomes stronger or weaker. So that is definitely something that will be under discussion. But more important under discussion would be how to ensure certain balance in their bilateral trade, particularly when Russia is very focused on using both its defense exports and energy exports. But between defense exports and energy exports, two things are likely. One, in short term, if Ukraine war comes to an end, Russian energy supplies are going to go back to European countries, which are much more premium, high value destinations for Russia than sending it to India. You know, it was just before pandemic about 2% part of India's imports of total oil. It has hit up to 36, 37% when we were buying a lot of oil from Russia. It could go back to same situation. Russia would like to sell oil and gas to European countries, and India would then have to explore other sources of energy, which is where nuclear cooperation, both at the level of heavy, big-sized reactors like Kudankulam, how will we move forward in completing 3, 4, and 5 units, but also small modular reactors. Indeed, nuclear cooperation is something where Russia would like to expand, and India can become a very complementary player because India needs lots of energy to become Viksit Bharat. So here, right from mining to fabricating fuel to waste management, the whole fuel cycle is something that they want to expand cooperation. You mentioned about nuclear submarines. That takes us to defense cooperation. So Russia's other major pillar, which complements with India, is to build defense cooperation. And that's not simply India importing equipment or even the old style license production. Now for 20 years, India and Russia have tried to move that relationship into joint research and development, joint production, and expanding India's export competitiveness in that sense. Russia's exports to India in terms of defense equipment is not one example where it has gone down from 69-70% of India's total imports to 36-37%. Russia's overall defense exports around the world have really shrunk, and they need to expand that back because that is the main source of foreign exchange earning from Russia for Russia, and therefore they would like to see how partnerships with India can make them sustain in terms of being competitive in global market, not just with India. BrahMos is a great example in this. So they would like to recalibrate some of these relationships so that they can be sustained, and what can be sustained will be carried forward. India's interest in ensuring a certain balance in trade is to expand it to other sectors. India is presenting GCCs, Global Capability Centers, India's professional talent.
Right.
India is talking about pharmaceutical, education, and all other sectors. So India would like to broad base it, and using broad base then to make it future secure, future proof in that sense, so that volatility in international relations doesn't really push Russia and India with tariffs and sanctions into levels of discomfort. So I think that is the focus on both sides, to make it broad based and ensure that it sustains in coming years.
A final word. A final word, if I could bring in from Ms. Veena Sikri on what can the common man see as benefit with the two countries coming together. Of course, overall economy, yes, but we see very clearly that labor migration is something that Russia is really hoping to. Their labor force is shrinking. They're really looking at hiring extensively from India to bridge their workforce gap. So in that sense, what is the citizen of India benefiting from this relationship?
I think manpower exports from India to Russia will definitely benefit the common man. It will benefit from because people from small towns will go. It's not only the people from big cities who will go. And I think there will be a vast variety of skills that Russia will request for their manpower requirements from India. And this will cover a vast majority, of skills, and highly skilled and highly educated, but not so skilled, maybe construction and so on. So many different areas are there because there are so many towns and cities in Russia that are also being built. India itself has opened up 2 new consulates in Russia, in different parts of Russia, to cater to the increased trade focus and manpower export focus that we would see. But I also think that trade regular trade increases, as was just said, that we have to increase our exports beyond the very paltry $5 billion a year that India now exports. And this will not only help the average exporter, because, with the tariffs imposed by America, by President Trump's government, a lot of exports to the US have fallen. But we have been trying to compensate this by increasing our exports of those very same commodities to other countries, looking for fresh markets. And President Putin himself has said that they are willing to open up their markets to all the items where President Trump has, where the tariffs imposed by President Trump has restricted the Indian exports. So this means that, we're looking at, seafood supplies, we're looking at pharmaceuticals, we're looking at gems and jewelry, we're looking at textiles. Textiles is a very big factor because the Russian market could be a very big market for Indian textile, and ready-made garments and so on. So these are really benefits that will go across the country, because the traders, the manufacturers, the exporters are spread all across the country, east, west, north, south. And so I think they are all looking with great interest to the outcome of this visit, so that the benefit can come to them directly and they can really gear up in a big way. But the Russian market is very big and very sophisticated now. So, all the goods that work with the West can go here now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I really appreciate Ms. Veena Sikri, Professor Swaran Singh and Major General S.P. Asthana for joining us and giving us a wholesome view of what India-Russia relations are looking like and what could be on the table for discussions for the next 2 days. Trust News9 to bring you every detail as and when it comes. We played you live visuals all through this half an hour to show you the present live, beaming live visuals for you to show what currently is happening between Modi and Putin, the two leaders and their visit.